So we are live on Prepper Talk Radio, radio for the ready-minded, the podcast for the prepared. Today we have Shane and I, Paris Clough, on the show. Scott is off on a family adventure of some kind, and so we're going to excuse him for this one, and he'll be back next week. We're going to message here that says that our Facebook group is something's weird with the live stream into there. Sorry about that.
Now, let me check that out here.
But we want to just let you guys know we're excited about our live today. If you're live with us, make sure you hit the button. We didn't, Scott, because of Scott's adventure, we don't know how to do the pre-programmed thumbnail and all that other stuff. So hopefully you jump on here soon and you get with us. But if you're not, if you're listening to this later, we're going to be posting this. Actually, this will go out on our podcast to iTunes and Spotify on 4th of July. So everybody who is listening to this on 4th of July, celebrate with your families, be with your families. Thank you for being a patriot. Thank you for, helping, build the foundation of a good, strong country. So we want to make sure that we recognize the fact that this episode, although we're live in June still, it will go out on our podcast platforms on the 4th of July. So hope you have a great evening with your family and friends. But before we jump into our topic today, which is where are you on your preparedness journey? We want to just remind everybody to check out our affiliate links in the description below. One in particular, I actually, funny thing is that Scott has been challenging me for the last several weeks to get this ham radio prep going and get my technician license. And we have a contest going right now still. So for those of you who would like to join the contest, go to hamradioprep.com and enter the code Prepper Talk for 10% off and get your license, get your ham radio license. I'm going to get it. I actually have now got progress to report. I have made it through the first 5 modules of the ham radio class. And so I will be making progress more regularly now so that as soon as I think Scott says, as soon as one of us gets it, then we're going to run the contest for everybody who got it before us. I'm not sure exactly what the details are, but anyways, go to hamradioprep.com, enter Prepper Talk and get your 10% off and get your ham radio license, technician license, or if you have technician, get the next one. And anybody who gets the next one will also get into the entry for the contest, which is a nice grab and go bag and a handheld radio. So it's going to be worth. And the biggest thing though is our swag, right? Like that's the deal. Of course, the patch is the biggest deal. So we have, if you're joined our Facebook group at Emergency Prep and Self-Reliance, you might find a little bit of an echo in our topic tonight. And one of the questions we ask is, where are you in your preparedness journey? And the answers we ask is the multiple choice answers are just getting started and need a lot of help. That's the first level. Second level is I've done a few things, but need help filling in the gaps. The third level is I feel prepared, but I'm open to more. And the fourth level is I'm prepared and ready to go, and I'd like to give back. So we'll probably jump into each one of those, but then maybe even add a couple little subcategories as well. So that's kind of our show tonight. Hopefully, if you're listening, you'll hit like and you'll hit so the algorithm knows you're here and the show is on and we're going. So tell us, if you're listening, tell us, where are you in your preparedness journey?
Yeah, and I wanted to in particular talk about these questions because I'm the one who accepts your invites to the our Facebook page, the Emergency Prep and Self-Reliance page. And so I see the answers to your questions. We just have a couple simple questions like that Paris mentioned. And I wonder, what is your interpretation of each one of these questions, right? It's definitely going to be different than mine, right? And so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today is just getting started. Okay, what does that mean? I have done a few things, need help on other things. What does that mean to you? And then I feel prepared and open to more, or I'm ready, right? I'm prepared. Are you really? Of course, that's a thought that goes through my mind. Do you really know what that means to say you're prepared? Are you prepared for a year or 2 years, 7 years? That is a huge topic. And I thought it was worth taking some time to talk about because I think I'll speak for myself. I tend to overestimate my level of preparedness. I'd like to be very positive. I'd like to be optimistic, and that can tend to hurt myself. Saying, "Oh, look at all this stuff I have," and then I look at other family friends that say, "Oh yeah, we've got a year's worth because." Of food storage because we ordered it from this online and it said this was a year's worth for one or two people or whatever. And one thing they forget is, oh, they've had two or three more kids since they bought that,
Mm.
right? And they're not prepared, and maybe they have only freeze dried because it's easy and you stick it in the basement, right? So those are the kind of things I wanted to talk about. Is when you say where you're at in your preparedness journey, uh, if you say I feel prepared, but I'm open to more, okay, I'm still going to question that. How prepared? We could throw out some scenarios. We could talk about end of the world stuff, kind of doom and gloom stuff to say, are you really? Are you sure? So that's kind of where I wanted to take this conversation today. So I'd love to hear what you guys in the chats have to say.
Well, I've had a lot of folks that the good news about my church organization is that we value emergency preparedness, self-reliance. We value those things. So at least when you have a conversation about it, the people aren't like rolling their eyes at you. They're more like, oh yeah, you're right. I probably should do better. You know what I mean? So what was interesting is that in my area, and we talked a little bit about this on the last episode, if you've listened to it already, but in my area, we had a power outage not too long ago. And it was interesting to talk to some of my neighbors afterwards about, hey, what did you do? Or like, if it was out longer, what would we need to do? Or if one of the neighbors had a medical concern where they needed to have oxygen or something like that, what was they going to do? What were they going to do? I remember going on my cell phone, I was able to log into Facebook and look at our city's community page. And there was a lot of people that were nervous that like, I have oxygen. I only have so many hours of battery backup. And I'm thinking to myself, I mean, those are things I don't think about because I don't have those medical concerns. And even last week or 2 weeks ago, we talked with Jace Medical about some of the medical supplies. And Scott said that he felt so much better after getting a year supply for his wife. And I'm like, oh crap, my wife has medicines. I haven't got a year supply of those yet. So there were some things that I learned. I was like, dang it, so when the power went out at my house, I wasn't too worried about it because I have, tons of stuff. I have lights, I have, solar backups, I have, power, I have dual fuel generators. So I wasn't necessarily worried. The one thing that I shared already on the show last week was that I just didn't realize that my microwave was embedded into the cabinetry. So I couldn't unplug it to plug it in so I could warm up my food. Like that was my problem. So I feel like I'm prepared and ready to go and I want to give back. But at the same time, I'm still on the journey. Like I'm still like, there's things I need to learn. I learned so much from a lot of you guys that are listening, especially the guys that show up to the live on a regular. I just learned, I thank you so much for being listeners, being with us and helping us spread the word about preparedness. Cause I actually do. I think this is funny, practical. I don't know anything and have no preps of any kind. That's totally gray man, bro. That's perfect. I love I love that. Oh, goodness sakes.
Yeah, no, I love that as well. And that's obviously the smart way to go. But obviously you can do this yourself. You don't have to share, right? And that's the safest way to go, especially with us knowing how many lists are actually out there. Or we imagine how many lists are out there that we could all potentially be on, right?
I like this here from WebDad. I believe everyone has to prepare for his own situation. I think that's what I mean. Learn what works for you. Don't necessarily copy someone else. I mean, there's some foundational things like we should all have a flashlight. You know what I mean? But when it boils down to a few other things, like where do you live? Do you live in hurricane? Do you live in tornado? Do you live in earthquake? Do you live in the cold? Do you live in the hot? I mean, you really got to be ready. I like that, but you really do need to personalize your preps as much as you need to have there are some foundational things that work for everybody. Like you need to have rope and a lighter and flashlights and things like that and extra clothes. But there are definitely some specifics for you that you need to really figure out.
Now, WebDad mentioned, preps are constantly evolving. I don't believe in the theory of evolution, but in this instance, yeah, absolutely. I have seen that through my journey in prepping, absolutely, it is an evolution. It is a pretty hard journey and a lot of hard lessons learned, that you get to a certain point and you realize I've got to change this whole aspect. I mean, hopefully not a broad aspect, but this whole aspect, I'm attacking this entirely wrong. Or you move locations, or like myself, I picked up a bug out property and I'm attacking that completely differently, and I've kind of paused what I'm doing here at home to focus out there. And it's absolutely an evolution, and very, very personal. But as I mentioned here, imitation is a sincere form of flattery. It definitely doesn't hurt to say, okay, this guy's doing that, I'm going to copy this, and hopefully through that journey, you realize, oh, this is not something I need. This won't work for me. I'm going to swap it out for this. And then you get to a certain point where you're like, I can do this on my own. I can now teach other people, because obviously the best way to learn is to teach, right? The easiest way to learn is to teach. And so I can now teach other people. And then through that teaching, and this has been a journey for me as well, online with all of you and with Scott, over the years doing radio and such. This has benefited me, I think, more than anybody else. And
Yeah.
if you would have known me at first before we started doing live radio, I'm an absolute introvert. And once I get talking on radio, I'm the opposite. And so it's been good for me for more than just prepping reasons. So I appreciate your patience with my stumbling much of the time. So
Hey,
absolutely learning. Go for
Practical. If everybody, most of you know who listen to us regularly, that we record 2 episodes at once, back to back, Wednesday nights. We record at 5 and then we go live at 6, and then they get, put out Tuesday and Thursday. So Practical, we actually talked about this on our 5 o'clock recording. This, what he's saying here is he's just reminding everybody about how the cartels are operating in the woods and the mountains throughout the United States, lacing the fauna and flora with fentanyl and other poisons, and as they grow farms of illegal substances. And so just be aware related to that. So if you didn't catch last episode where we talked about kind of the world, what's going on in the world, threat levels, things of that nature, go back and catch that one. I think it's going to be episode 387. Don't quote me on that. I'm just going by memory here, because I just edited 386 to go out tomorrow morning, which is going to be June 27th. So anyways, yeah, thanks so much for that information, Practical. That's kind of the thing that I love about having a community, is that I don't see things, you guys do. We see things, you don't. We all share what we see, and we all get edified and grow together. Like, it's awesome to have a community. Another plug for our Facebook group, or just stay in contact with us, however you feel comfortable staying in contact with us, because the more we can help each other get each other's sick, so to speak, and see things. I was listening to a podcast today about this very thing that Practical was talking about. And one of the things that he said is they were in a gunfight, and they were actually exchanging bullets, and it was really intense. And a couple of the guys in his team saw one of the guys, the enemy, in a position to ambush them. And they warned him, and he said because they warned him about what they saw, he was still alive today because he was warned in time. And we're not in a gunfight right now directly with bullets buzzing past our head, but make no mistake, we're at war, and we have political, emotional conditioning, programming. We got elites throwing, political bullets, so to speak, emotional bullets past us all the time. So we got to be aware and helping each other out, which is, anyways, that's my two thoughts. So that's part of being aware of, where are you on your preps? And so there's people that are brand new, waking up to the world of prepping, and why. The reason why we prep has a lot to do with why we get started. There's people that I've met, they're like, hey, Paris, the power outage in our neighborhood, what battery bank do you use? How much food should I have? Like, that caused somebody to get started to ask questions. Somebody might see what's going on with Ukraine and some other world news and be like, Paris, what do we do to prepare? Or Shane, what do we do to prepare? Like, so anyways, I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. Like,
No, like me. Is that what you're going to say? Rambling like you, Shane.
sorry, Shane. I feel like I was doing a little bit of
No,
this.
I get it. Sometimes I just got to get things out there, and I ramble, and it's good to be interrupted sometimes.
I want to stay on focus here with what we're trying to talk about, because we got a
Yeah.
little bit of a rabbit trail there for a minute. But
So yeah, I guess my next question is, how do you gauge yourself where you're at? Obviously, you can count calories, you can count your gear, and I think that needs to be done. I think that's really important to say. I've got 3 kids at this age, under this age. They'll have so many calories. I can plan for 4,000 calories for myself, and so on and so forth. I think that's important to do. It can be tedious, especially to try and inventory your preps, your food storage in particular, and try and plan out every meal and such. It can definitely get a bit overwhelming. I know, because I've tried it and I've worked on it, and I redo it on a regular basis. But what do you guys do? And is there any rule? Are there any rules of thumb that you look at and say that I've got 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, a year worth of storage of not just food, but of fuel and other supplies, medical supplies, things that you will need for at least a year that you may not be able to get, because I tend to think worst case. I don't know why. I do know why, because I will be more ready if I think worst case. I think when I'm going through these, accepting these people into the group, and they say, I'm just getting started. Okay, what does that mean? Do you have 3 days of food on your cupboards? Do you have 2 weeks? Do you have a month? What does that exactly mean? And is that
they just have their kit, their grab and go bag made?
Yeah, maybe that's all that
And it
has.
might be they bought it from Walmart.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think for me, working towards worst case, it means more stuff. You just can't have enough stuff if you're looking on beyond a year's worth of preparedness, which is where I see kind of our last level question. I feel prepared and open to more, or I'm prepared and would like to give back. That's, for me, that's a year, food storage and everything, really everything you could possibly need, meds and so forth.
I like what Mountain Readiness said here. He's like, too often we see folks spending $300 on a flashlight, and their food prep is 5 gallons of rice and a box of Twinkies.
Amen.
I agree. That's like, that to me is between just getting started and I've done a few things but need help filling the gaps. Like, so don't get me wrong. I love, and Shane, you and I we love gear, right? Don't get us wrong.
Flashlights in particular. Yeah.
Right? Hey,
I love my Phoenix flashlight. Just ordered one today.
The coolest next thing coming out.
I've got like
18
flashlights, and I ordered another one today.
Mountain followed up with prioritizing your preps. And I think that's absolutely true. And that to me is where absolutely. I just got started. I need a lot of help. That to me means I just got introduced to the prepper world. Maybe I have a kit. Maybe I got, I bought one of these things on a commercial because I was listening to, Dan Bongino, and he said to buy, whatever. Or I was listening to some other conservative radio show, Glenn Beck, and they said to buy this food 3-month supply or whatever. And so they're now ready for the next level. Like, what do I do? Now it's time to prioritize your preps, figure out and put a game plan together to really build towards the point where you feel confident enough that if a natural disaster happened, you'd be okay, or at least you'd be able to figure out how to be okay quickly and put at ease your family and your neighbors. And then when you get to that point, I think that's where that I'm prepared and ready to give back. And that's the thing about a teacher. A teacher is still always learning. I can teach a class on financial preparedness or emergency preparedness or, a few other things, but I'm still learning. You know what I mean? Like, I'm still growing too. Like, so you never stop. Like somebody said that recently, like in our comments here. I don't remember who said it, but
well, yeah. I mean, you're talking about prioritizing preps, first of all. Of course, my comment on that is we use the survival rules of 3 for priority, right? Especially when you're getting started, right? I think that's probably the hardest thing for most people. Like, where do I start? I don't know where to start. Shelter, water, food, and safety for me. Those are the survival rules of 3.
Mhm.
3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, right? So that should align where your preparedness should be. And then reach out for 2 weeks, reach out, and so on and so forth. And then, like you say, a quality flashlight may not be priority at this time, but once you get okay, but when I get to 3 months, I'll feel comfortable in spending $80 on a nice flashlight, or getting more ammo, or another firearm. And then I'll go to 6 months in food storage, right? Because food and water, you got your shelter covered. You've got your mortgage, your rent, whatever.
Mhm.
Maybe you need to buy a tent because of you see yourself having to go somewhere, or an RV or something like that. That is very, very personal when it comes down to your personal plans, like you say, WebDad. And for you to copy me and my plans makes no sense whatsoever. And I had some other great thoughts as well. Of course, I blew right
Well, no,
past them.
who was it here? I think that said, plan to your budget too. Like, I can't remember. I'm just trying to scroll back here
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
comments,
yeah.
but you got to plan to your budget. I feel like a lot of people get so overwhelmed with a $7,000 a year supply of food that they're like, forget it. I'm not going to even start because that's too much money. I don't have $7,000. You're right. I don't either, right? Frankly, but I have, $25 per week extra, or $100 that I could throw in per month to buy some extra goods to fill up my 90-day pantry. Buy foods that you're already eating and then grow from there. Like, for example, what do you eat for breakfast every morning? If it's something that's perishable, then you can't really store it. But if it's like a cereal or a grain of some kind, you can store 90 days of that quick. Well, what do you eat for lunch? Store 90 days of that. What do you eat for dinner? Or some things you're willing to eat for dinner. You can't always store everything you eat for dinner. But you can have a supply of, maybe you have a supply of hamburger meat that you put in the freezer and freeze. That can hold out for a while, and you can have 10 or 15, 20 pounds of meat in your freezer if you're doing, and then you have a power bank so that if the freezer goes out, you can have a power bank for the freezer. So there's levels of prep that you can get to, and that takes time. Like, you guys teased me forever, and I was always talking about getting a solar power bank and a generator, right? Literally, when did I buy it? Like last year, I bought my first, I think I bought my first dual fuel generator beginning of last year.
Oh, yeah,
And then later that year, ended up buying my power bank. But bro, we've been doing this podcast already 3 years almost.
yeah.
And then it was like, you and I had known each other for 2 or 3 years before that. Like,
Well, and again, it's of course, it's about budget as well, right? Because
Mhm.
okay, I've got cash in the bank, which I could spend, or I could cash out this investment, whatever, and buy a generator. What is priority, right? And as we watch the news and see things, the news, I'm going to use air quotes, sorry guys, as we watch the current events and we see what's going on, then yeah, that should maybe spark, maybe I should get a generator and a power bank, right? And then,
Mhm.
and that's what I've been doing. I've mentioned this before. I keep all my savings in precious metals, and I have been actually selling some gold lately. It's been good time, right? I'm above board in it, but my savings is in gold, and I have determined for myself that it is more important to get certain things, get stuff done right now, rather than wait for my goal to where I want. I've already set for myself to where gold and silver should be. I just finished planting my orchard, and I dipped into my savings, using the air quotes, savings, to buy my trees and everything I need, fencing and deer fencing, whatever, to get those planted, because that takes a long time. It takes years for those trees to grow to get to where they can start putting off fruit, good fruit. And so I felt that was a priority for me, because I've been doing this for a long time, and I have gotten to that 1 year point, and I need to push beyond that. Like White had said, you have to have stuff for a year, but you got to have stuff like tools and such to get beyond that, and resources and garden and fruit trees. And
Mhm.
so, and we've discussed, this does not end for me. For me, it doesn't end. For you, maybe it does. Hopefully, I would say hopefully it does. I say that with a little prayer, in that You get to a certain point and then you realize your eyes are more open, say, you know what, I need to be more prepared. I feel, and that's the important word, is your feelings. You need to have that inspiration to know where you should go next rather than just follow us. Oh, Shane, he's got a bug out location and he planted some trees. Maybe I should do that too. Maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. I don't know. And I definitely don't want to say, what you should do, but that should be to your inspiration. And whether you need to dig into your savings to do this or not, I don't know how much time we have left. I feel I need to be working as quickly as I can. So I'm doing this every weekend. I'm being, pretty intense, but still living in the world, trying not to be of the world. Right. So
Yeah, absolutely. That goes along with what Mountain just said. You can have 1 week of preps, 2 weeks, 3. You can have a year supply, but what if it lasts longer than a year? You got to have sustainable preps as well. That's 100%. I love that. Practical says it's better to spend $200 on $10 flashlights than on one flashlight. That's a really good point because, you might have that one flashlight that either breaks or you slip and fall and it gets down a crack and now you have no flashlight. So there's some wisdom in having some redundancy on some of these things. I like what WebDad said up here too. Do a prep game with somebody. Call them and have them tell you about, call somebody out of nowhere. This emergency XYZ just happened, and then pretend like it's real and run some scenarios. If you got a neighbor or somebody that's a good buddy of yours, that's kind of a fun thing to do as well. We every once in a while and maybe now that's kind of our indication that it's time to do another show, but we'll bring out the conflicted card game and we'll talk about a scenario. Okay, this just happened. What do you do? I know that when I first started prepping, one of the things that I realized was I had 5 kids, and my wife and I, so there's 7 people in our family. So I needed to get 7. I was like, man, I got to get 7 emergency grab and go bags filled to the rim. I don't want to buy it off the shelf because Scott already told me I'll kill myself or somebody else if I buy one of those. And so I wanted to buy stuff that was good quality. I did my Amazon purchases. I did a bunch of research. And I was like, this is a lot of money. And then, of course, I went for it and did it. And then I bought more. Like I've swapped some things out over time as my income has increased. I allot a certain dollar amount to my preps and I build up my emergency fund. And frankly, part of my emergency fund is having a generator. Part of my emergency fund is having food. Part of my emergency fund is having being prepared for what comes. It was kind of funny. There's a financial group that I'm in on Facebook, and somebody was like, hey, I just got a big inheritance. What should I do with it? And I was like, hey, he was talking a little bit about some conspiracies in his message because he was like, hey, with what's going on in the world and some of these other things, what do you think I should do? And I was like, dude, food, water, grab and go bags, gold and silver. You know what I mean? Like I was like, I'll go into prepper mode on this answer. So, cause he kind of brought it up but those are all things I would rather have my power bank that I spent 3 or 4, whatever it was, than $3,000 when the power goes out. Like, what am I going to do with $3,000 cash or 2,000, whatever it was, when I'd rather have that money in my power bank than in
the bank
account. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
but like Mike's comment here, also need to prep for nothing to happen. Mike always has the best insights. Appreciate it, Mike. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, okay, you've got that money in your power bank or you've got it in your bank account. Again, that needs to be entirely up to you where you feel comfortable having that, but also be prepared for that thing to sit there and do nothing for years, right? And have the feeling of saying, man, did I make a bad decision here? I've made so many of those bad decisions that it feels good. If that makes any sense, right? I've got so much gear that it gets rarely used that it is an asset to me, right? It is worth more than, again, like I say, more than money, dollars in the bank. And I'm going to use the word money very carefully because only gold and silver is money. Everything else is currency. Everything else is debt, right? So do we need to be prepared for the consequences of our actions? I guess that's what I'm saying. and that if nothing happens, I'm happy to say, good, great, nothing happened. But I have made that decision, and I'm living with that decision, and I'm happy I made that, and I'm not looking back, and I'm not going to feel regret, because it was a good decision at the time. It didn't affect me financially. It's not compromising my retirement or anything like that. Retirement. I'm going to use those air quotes again. I hate that word. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So there's, that's the thing too, is years ago, there was a leader in our church that said something that was very profound. He's like, look, I'm going to prepare for the end of the world and Jesus to come, but I'm going to go plant a couple cherry trees, which means that whether or not, the world ends tomorrow, we're alive today, and we should still act like, hey, we're going to leave. Everything's going to be okay. And that's where you get to the point where you kind of have, you're at peace with what you've got. And when you're not prepared, then you have anxiety and worry and other things. And I feel like, there's a level of preparedness that you can get to where you kind of just, okay, I'm going to level off here. I kind of climbed that hard mountain where I've got some food, I've got some water, I've got some preps. Just the other day, I was thinking to myself, you know what? I probably ought to have another 250-gallon water tank. But the fact that I have one 250-gallon water tank already is like, okay, I can breathe because I at least have something. Now I need to go get some more.
Yeah.
But the reason why I was thinking about that was because after you use what you store, what's the plan to get more? Because that's one of the big things. You can only store so much water. Where are you going to go to get long-term sustainable water? And that's where you need filters or pumps, things of that nature. So that's the next stage. So start with, what do I need first? Like if I don't have water storage, start with water bottles, then the 55-gallon drums. Then if you can afford it, a 250-gallon drum. Then worry, okay, now that you've got that set aside, start saving up money for filters or pumps that you can go to the river or the stream and then get a map so that you know how to get to the river or stream in case your GPS is broke down. You know what I mean? Like, there's the thing about preps is that there's a level of preps where you need to I feel like you should rush to, like, get food, get water, get some gear. Okay, take a break. Now reassess. I've got some food. I've got 90 days of food, 90 days of water. Whew, okay, I'll be okay. Most emergencies are in our life are going to be about 90 days. You'll be okay. The big stuff, you're going to need longer term stuff. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, we got to get to that point, but don't get so overwhelmed with, oh my gosh, I just read the book the 1 second after, and there was an EMP and they were, half the population died because the first year they couldn't. Take a deep breath. It's okay. You'll get there, but I don't have time. What if I don't have time? Well, you'll take a deep breath. It's okay. You know what I mean? Like, don't panic. That's not a prepared mind.
Yeah. Few thoughts, is in getting stuff, life isn't about stuff. I acknowledge that. I'd rather have less stuff, but my goal, and the reason I continue, like you guys talking about prepping and perpetuity, and perpetual prepping. It really, the ultimate goal for me, and I assume it is for you guys too, is self-reliance, self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency is virtually impossible without lots of stuff, without lots of resources and money and currency. But my goal is to get to a point to where I have enough stuff to where I could unplug for a year, whether there's an emergency or not, that I can live away from the grid and, again, use that retire word, and unplug and have the comforts that I have now. I hate to admit, but I do like to have my comforts. I don't want to just go live in a tent, right? And fish and do that through winter and just be miserable. I live in the world, and I'm pretty comfortable, and that's kind of what I'm trying to prepare for, is long-term comfort. I mean, to an extent, obviously, different type of comfort, but I had some other thoughts here too. I wanted to get to looking back at some of your comment. Yeah, go ahead.
While you were thinking about that, is one of the things I was listening to a show that's pretty popular, and they were talking. It was they were talking to some Indians, some Native Americans, and and they were saying, they were kind of, trying to, they wanted to develop the land, and the Native Americans were like, the problem is that we work with the land. We don't go get food. We know how to have the land produce the food. We don't go buy clothes. We know how to produce the clothes. We know how to make the clothes. And some of these things are so lost. And I'm
Yeah.
guilty, dude. Like if you gave me some of these materials that these Native Americans know how to do and said, "Hey, go make a tunic or go make a shirt," I'd be like, you know.
Yeah.
So there's some things that I really need to learn, and one of the things that and I'm reading a book right now called "Ego is the Enemy" by Ryan Holiday. It's a Stoicism book. I highly recommend it, by the way. And one of the things I suffer from is this thought that, oh, I'm so smart, I'll figure it out. Well,
Mm.
yeah, there's a level of that confidence that needs to be there, but at the same time, you got to be ready. Like I need to be prepared more effectively and efficiently, and that's where I'm like, oh, well, I'll figure it out. Well, no, you get some muscle memory right now, learn some skills right now, so that when you do have to figure it out in a stressful situation, it'll be a lot smoother. And that was something that I really realized, that, you know what, I need to step up my game in a few of these areas.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this is not just about what you have, but what you don't have. In that, you don't have debt. I mean, that's the big one. And you know, Paris, this is right up your alley. Obviously, there's good debt and there's bad debt, right? Secured debt, unsecured debt, and so forth. I think, my opinion, if you get to the six to where you have 6 months worth of food storage and you're feeling good, you're making progress, and you feel like, man, I can keep doing this. I can get to a year. That's the point where uh, maybe where you pause and say, you know what, I'm going to hold off and I'm going to pay this credit card off, or I'm going to pay this debt off, and then have that little bit extra comfort to where you're more self-sufficient uh, in that aspect. You've gotten rid of those things, or pay this car off. Obviously that, again, that's very personal. And I had to take that kind of a pause as well to say, okay, I'm going to, like precious metals, I've got to a point where, like, okay, I'm comfortable. I have certain goals. I've set those goals. These are my targets. And I'm going to pause at this point with that aspect of saving, again, air quotes, saving. And because I believe, and my method is, gold is my savings, silver is my retirement. Again, I hate that word. But so I got to that point. Okay, what's the next step? And for me, it has been getting out on the land and improving that, and having a place to get out of here. Because ultimately, what's more important for me is my freedom and getting out of the system and getting self-reliant. And so that's my next step. Again, it evolves. That word evolution, I think, for me, speaking for me personally, it just continues to take a little step higher, take a little step higher. And I don't know where that's going next, but I'm really excited about where it's taken me.
Yeah, I really like this. Practical says he just picked up 2 sewing machines. One was
Mm-hmm.
20 and the other was free. Both work great, just needed new leather belts, which I made from some rawhide I have. Like, Practical, yeah, you're the man, man.
Yes,
Like, I
yes.
just love that. Like, if you, I barely even know what rawhide is, let alone how to make it into a belt that will work on a sewing
Where to
machine.
get it from?
Yeah, that's awesome. Like, right. Where do you get rawhide? Well, it's like an animal. Anyway, so I think that's awesome. That's where I learn from, um, part of the, I mean, here I am, a host of a preparedness show, and I actually learn more about preparedness from some of the guys that are listening and some of the comments that we get. So thank you guys again for all that you do to add to those that can show up on the live and add to what we're doing here, and give great insight and wisdom and share your experiences, because it's huge. I just realized the other day too, I was answering a question for somebody that they're, one of the, in the financial world, there's something called FIRE, financial independence, retire early. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a huge movement to just live penny pinch, basically, until you have, a million and a half, whatever, in the bank, that you can then say, I'm going to quit my 9 to 5 corporate grind, and I'm just going to live off the interest of my account, and I'm going to then pursue something more meaningful. And I don't don't get me wrong, I agree with some of that mentality. However, this person in this comment in this Facebook group was like, we're gonna, none of our friends really invite us to things anymore. My parents, my husband's parents, they all think we're just cheap. They're mad at us all the time because we don't, go out to eat or anything like that. But we're gonna be millionaires at the end of the year. And I just thought to myself, you're missing out on the journey because you're so destination oriented that you're missing on so many opportunities. I'm like, what if you slowed down, enjoyed your friends, went out to dinner every once in a while, and you became a millionaire in 2 years? Would that be bad? Like, that's not bad. That's that more balanced approach. So I love what you're saying, Shane. It kind of reminded me that, hey, maybe after 6 months of food, maybe after you've kind of hit a goal or a milestone, maybe think about some other areas that you could be more self-reliant in. Maybe, instead of putting $100 into a new, flashlight or something, maybe go to, hamradioprep.com and putting in $70 towards your learning how to be a ham radio operator, or maybe it's, going to the first aid class, or learning to be CPR certified. Maybe it's some other maybe you're going to put that into some skills now. So don't get so focused on, I got to have my year supply, and you're just zoning in and you completely forget to have fun with your friends or pay off your credit card balance that you're paying 26% interest on.
Yeah.
Have the balance. Remember that the journey is often more worth more than the destination. Obviously you want to get there, but don't miss the journey, because you want to be able to, I feel like, every once in a while, it's good to stop and smell the flowers and just enjoy the journey and the process.
Yeah, practical. He mentioned his biggest talk about bolts and clearance fabrics, right, for sewing and so forth. Yeah, and I've seen some YouTube videos where people have inherited their parents and their grandparents' stockpile of bolts and screws and hardware and all kinds of things that have been passed down from generation to generation. My personal experience, I've been collecting leftover screws and bolts for a long time, which I do use on a regular basis. When my dad passed away, he had collected a lot of stuff as well. And of course, I've got, there's 7 of us, 7 siblings, and none of them wanted any of that stuff, right? What the stuff that was just in the sheds, been sitting there my entire life, right? Has Dad ever used any of that stuff? I don't know. But in building my Quonset and greenhouse, I have been constantly digging through these things. Oh, wow, I can use that. Wow, I can use that. And not having to go out and buy it. And so, yeah, practical. Absolutely. There is, I don't know if there's a fine line between hoarding and stockpiling, but, stockpiling is having things of value that, I get to the point where, like, I just can't throw that bolt is so good. I can't throw that away. I might use that in the future. There's the nut for it. There's a washer. I'm going to stick that over there and I'm going to hang on to that. Yeah, absolutely. And I would like to have a stockpile of fabrics as well. I think that's important, but maybe I'll just use you as I'll barter with you, practical, on making some clothes for me. I did learn to sew in high school and I'm pretty good at using a sewing machine. And I do have sewing machines, but not a treadle. That is on my list as well as some fabric. But again, it's space. Where am I going to put it? It's going to sit there for years and not use it. But when I need it, man, I'm going to need it. I tell you, I can just tell
you have it.
I'm going to need that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was one of the things when I started looking at different tools. I was like, all I have are power tools that require either a power cord or a battery.
Yeah.
And I was like, I need to have a few of the old-fashioned, ways to saw. That's hand saw. I need to have one of those. I don't know what they're called. Off the top of my head, I'm drawing a blank. But those where you crank the screwdriver,
hand drill, yeah,
like a hand drill, a hand drill where you can actually drill things with the hand. And having things like that on hand is important. Screwdrivers, Phillips heads, flatheads, all that stuff. Having regular set of tools that doesn't require power is, it's even good to practice. Like the other day, I was trying to cut down some branches into my tree. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to use a handsaw rather than the electrical saw. And I was worn out. I was like, man, maybe part of my workout is just doing sawing back and forth. So just remember that, part of the journey in preparedness is keeping the balance of having stuff, mental and awareness, skill sets, but then also being physically fit, physically in a place where you could hike or go or lift something. Like, I think one of the things that I just remember years ago, I was talking to somebody, and I like working out. I work out every day, and I'm not like bodybuilder or anything, but I just try to stay fit and conditioned. And I went on a hike, and I was like, I need to go on hikes too. Like, I was exhausted. It wasn't even that long of a hike. And I was like, I work out every day. I'm on the treadmill, but it's different being
It's different.
outside
Yeah.
in the air, walking, hiking. My muscles were used differently. And there's level up and down in the roads, there's things of that nature. So even that kind of thing in preparedness, there's simple things that we just don't really think about that are important to what happens if an emergency and you got to grab your backpack and go. Like, do you have some conditioning that you could get longer, farther than 100 yards before you're like have to take a break and sit down? You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of people that are listening and maybe even just out there in the world that they don't realize how out of shape they are because they haven't been put to the test. And sometimes part of running scenarios like WebDad earlier talked about is also, hey, let's go on a mile hike and see how we feel.
Yeah, one of mountain readiness comments here. Yeah, test your gear. And there's definitely call it a trend of preppers, right? You buy the gear, you stick it on the shelf, right? Because you don't need it now, but and I'm somewhat guilty of this as well. I can see that I may need that in the future. I have the opportunity and the ability to purchase that, so I'm going to purchase it and I'm going to stick it on the shelf. But absolutely, one thing I have not used yet is my solar stove. I need to get that out on the patio, especially now it's so hot outside. I mean, and use that and learn actually how to efficiently use that solar stove to make some meals. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Test your gear.
make a
Use
loaf
it.
of bread or something simple.
Yeah, exactly. Go boil some water. I mean, that's that easy. How long does it take? How much can you put in there, and so forth, and then cook some soup and go from there. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's really cool. There's so many cool things that we even, modern things that make prepping, 50, 100 years ago, these people knew how to do things on the farm with stuff that we don't even have a clue. And then we make this cool new, like a solar stove, like solar ovens. Like, that wasn't around. Like, they had to do other funny things to create the same result. So,
oh, Paris, you froze up there, buddy. Or did you freeze up for everybody? Can you hear me? Comments, anyone? Paris is frozen up. Anyone? Can you hear us at all? Are we both frozen up? Did we get lost? Can you guys hear us? Not seeing any comments. Okay. All right. Well, unfortunately, I do not have control of the podcast. That is under Paris's venue, and so I do not have any control to this. So, let me text him and see what is up. See if he is. Oh, he's gone now. He's gone entirely. So he will have to log back on. All right. Well, thanks, guys. I think we'll probably call it here. Oh, there's Paris. There he is. We got you back.
Nothing like a real live internet outage in
That
the
was the
middle of a
first.
live show about preparedness.
That was a first. That hasn't actually happened to us before. So
that was, yeah, I just got this whole thing on my internet says, sorry, you're not connected to the internet. And I was like, what?
Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah.
So I don't know.
Well, they could still hear me. So yeah. But you have control. So.
Uh-oh. If I have the power, then we're in big trouble.
You have the control. You do. I don't have any control here.
Well, I was just ending the idea that with modern technology, we have some conveniences in prepping that people didn't have 50 or 100 years ago. So there's like a solar oven and other things. And so that was my monologue, so to speak, was during that power internet outage. I hope you can still hear me.
Well, like I always say, look to the past, prepare for the future, right?
Yeah, there's so many good things. I just actually joined. I don't know if you're familiar with this guy. We don't have an affiliate or anything. It's just a guy that I started following recently. I think he's called The Lost Ways on
Oh yeah, yeah, okay.
Instagram.
Hmm.
He's got some really cool. He was talking about how you can store meat with lard and how to make lard so that you can use
Hmm.
it as, because you can actually put meat in a jar and then put lard, fill up the lard, and then it actually preserves the meat, and you can preserve it for a long time. I don't remember what he said, but um, I think that was really cool. So there were some cool things that I learned as I was watching this guy's channel.
Yeah.
I didn't know if he's a YouTube guy or if but I saw him on Instagram. That's where I saw him. I think my brother, actually, who's probably listening, sent me the link to something about this whole meat preservation using lard. And so that was pretty cool. So just, I hope you're out there listening, learning, growing, developing skills, and getting better and better every day in your preps. And then when you learn something, one thing that I realized especially after creating the show, is that once I learned enough that I could feel confident talking about it, getting on the show has then helped me and forced me, by just because I don't want to be a hypocrite, to become better at what I do and what we do, and being prepared, and learning and developing skills so that I can actually speak with some kind of moral authority to the process.
Mhm.
So if you're learning about preparedness, one of the fastest ways to learn more is to find somebody that knows a little bit less than you and teach them what you know, and then you can grow from there. So any
Yeah.
final comments, Shane?
Well, I think one revelation I've had recently, I just wanted to point out, is kind of along this evolution line of for preparedness for me, for being a preparer, is I've got the orchard planted, I've got my greenhouse up and going, I've got my high tunnel, which I'm really working on next to get that soil ready and get it prepared. And so, and I've got a little garden here at home, and we're overrun with raspberries and peas. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with these things? We're eating them directly, but I need to better learn. And I think we're going to have Sydney's on in the next couple of weeks. I need to my next step. It needs to be how to have the canning supplies and so forth to be able to prepare to preserve the food that I am going to be producing out at my property. Right here at home, I can stick in the fridge, or I can give it to neighbors, or I can make some jam with raspberries and so forth. I can can the peas, but on a larger scale, it's kind of where I'm evolving to next. Now that my greenhouse and I can say an orchard and such are moving forward, now I've got to be prepared to deal with and preserve those foods out 2 hours away from here. So that's my next evolution, I think.
That's awesome, dude. Well, thank you guys for listening to Prepper Talk Radio, Radio for the Ready Minded. We're super excited that you are here with us. We had a really good show tonight. I feel like the comments coming in were really good, and show that we had a lot of interaction. When there's interaction, I feel like we've picked a good topic. So we appreciate you guys being here, being interactive. Those of you who are listening, remember if you're listening on the 4th of July, when this episode drops on Spotify, iTunes, Apple, whatever platform, make sure that you're spending time with your family, enjoying our country and the things that go into it. And remember that it's not about fireworks. It's about the freedoms that we enjoy and the ability to live in a country where we can really do the things that we need to do and live the way we can live. And let's try to maintain it. Let's do our best to maintain those principles and fight for what is true and right and freedom and liberty. Absolutely. In all ways we can. So again, thanks for listening. Join us in our Facebook group. Go to our website, preppertalkradio.com. Check the show notes for any links for any products and services, anything that you might need in your preparedness journey. Hit us up on any of our socials to let us know if you have any questions. Thank you so much. We'll see you on the next one.
See you next week. Thanks, guys.